Namaskar Trailblazer. I'm with a new episode where we are going to discuss about MCP versus API, or is it MCP with API? So we are trying to understand at the end of this episode, you will understand, is it a cold war happening between MCP and API, or is it something that MCP uses API to move further? If so, why? Right? So let's try to understand how the current world is actually working so that we try to understand the MCP and API better and why MCP was actually needed in the first place, right? So consider that you are in browser, or maybe you have an application that is downloaded which actually gives you weather forecast, right? So today I want to understand what is the weather forecast for tomorrow in Bangalore, let's say, or for today in Bangalore, or maybe in Karnataka, or maybe somewhere, right? So now if I have that question, then first thing that I would do usually is, or in the previous world is, I would have opened my application in mobile, or maybe I would have went to my Chrome or Edge or Firefox, where I would be searching what is the weather for Karnataka today, right? Now if I do that, then what used to happen is, as a user, when I actually go and enter that, then there will be a client that is actually expecting or accepting your input. Karnataka is the input, and then it would make a rigid JSON structure API to the server, where the server is the one who is actually storing the actual weather forecast, and that particular request will be received by the server API, and then it will be responding back with whatever the degrees centigrade that they have. Maybe it's 25 today, or maybe it's a bit chill, or maybe it's rainy, cloudy, whatnot, right? So then based on that, it will actually respond back, and the client will encrypt that. I mean, client will actually find that particular response back, and then it will render its JSON structure in its own UI, right? So now things were fine till that point, right? And whatever request that we were actually giving, whatever we were request we are getting, everything worked seamlessly unless or until there is a server down that was happening. So this is how the typical API work in the real world, right? If we can try to connect that with the Salesforce, probably you have some different system where there is a UI, or maybe there is server that is there present at the client end, where the client will make a request to our Salesforce DB, and then we have a format where we have to send the response. Now it could be the standard Salesforce open S object API, where authentication authorization will be done, and based on that, records will be shared across. If we have to find out a particular response to be sent back, then probably we will build our own endpoint and we will expose that. And if not, we can even use the we can even use composite API. We can try to do that, right? So this is typically API how it works, and we are happy with it unless we got another challenge. That means it is like with the chatbots that we have, right? Like now users are not actually clicking on Karnataka, or kind of a button click that is happening. It's more of an interactive that happened, right? So as soon as the interaction came in, what used to happen now, like as of now, what we are doing right now is, whenever a user asks query, for example, say Salesforce Vinayaka goes to Gemini Claude, and then they ask for what is the weather looks like today in Karnataka. Someone may ask, how is the weather in Karnataka, right? So the way of asking question is different, and the response that you are expecting, both of them are expecting, is the same. So right in that case, what was happening, whenever a question comes in, the agent will actually accept that particular question. It kind of hands over to LLM to let agent know what is this all about, like what is the user is trying to ask for, right? When the agent is actually sending the details to LLM to decrypt or to make agent understand, agent will also send what all the tools that it has with us, right? What all the integration that it can actually kind of perform, or what all the files that it already has. Maybe it is in the local server which is stored, right? What all the details that it has, so that it can send that to LLM, and LLM will try to understand what is the user question in the natural language. It will try to understand it from a systematic way and give the response based on that to agent. Now in case of our weather analogy that we are trying to point out, when I actually ask what is the weather for Karnataka, then agent will actually send that to LLM. Hey LLM, can you help me understand what Vinayaka is trying to tell? But I have these tools. I can actually make an API call out to weather, or what not, right? So all the details will be sent to this LLM. Now LLM will tell that, hey, this person Vinayaka is trying to ask for weather. You can use a tool which is external API connection that is there, which is weather tool, right? So then it will tell the agent will use that particular tool. Again, in this particular tool, it's something that rigid, where you got the request has, I mean, you have to request for weather. The client will actually make a request with weather for a given particular JSON structure, and server will actually captures that, and server will try to get the response back in a rigid format, where you will get the response back to your client, and this particular API will later hand over to the agent, where agent will kind of build its own, right? So whenever the agent gets the response, it actually sends back to LLM again. LLM will be decrypting or maybe trying to explain it in a better way, user readable format. Hey Vinayaka, this particular weather which you asked for is actually having 30-degree, cloudy, sunny, whatnot, right? So then agent will actually show the same response back to the user, right? So this is the typical world that we are right now, where we are trying to do that, right? But if you would have noticed, whenever you ask a question, there is always a follow-up question that it can actually ask for, right? So now that question that you can ask in your GPT, that is coming from LLM again. Let's, for example, let's say I ask a question for weather, and right now it's, let's say it's raining, right? Then LLM will also send the response with readable format that it is rainy and all, but it will also ask one question that, can you suggest what is the weather or what is the cloth that it can be wearing? Do you have to wear a jacket or anything like that? It is not answering you back, right? It is just asking the question. But what if you want to do those all the computation and calculation in the backend automatically, right? That is where MCP actually helps you a lot. So why? Right now also it is kind of giving you the answer from the LLM if it already has the value in their database or using the machine learning ML, right? But let's consider another scenario where you have to actually do multiple callouts based on the user request, but each callout may not be in a very standard rigid format, right? So now if you want to actually ask for weather API, then what I have to do in this particular scenario, probably I may have to create one more tool which will suggest the clothing for a given weather, right? The first request that will be going to this particular server is for what is the weather. When it actually gets the response back to this tool, the agent will hand over to the LLM. LLM will try to tell you that, okay, it's rainy. Can you, like, I have another tool which will suggest for weather. So there is another tool which suggests for weather. So can you go and talk to that particular API? Now agent will actually go and talk to that particular tool, where it will again make another API call out, and then it will kind of tell, okay, it's a rainy that you're trying to say, then probably the person has to carry the jacket, right? So it will actually send the jacket as a response, and agent will get the response back here, and LLM will try to give it in a more structured manner, and at the end the user will get a response saying that, Vinayaka, today it's rainy, so can you please carry the jacket with you also, right? So that is the kind of response that you will typically get, but the integration that you are doing is very tightly coupled in this scenario also. But consider from a Salesforce angle, right? So probably you have some kind of automation that is running, or maybe you have some flow that is actually exposed to you, right? So then in that particular case, you may actually cannot use that particular flow, right? In this scenario, in this world, so what you have to do, you have to expose your API endpoint, whatever you have done it in your flow, then probably you may have to do the same thing in your Apex. Now that will be a custom API callout that will be there as an exposed endpoint. Now whenever a particular request comes in for you, let's say list of account details that has to be coming, right? Now the tooling will be the API integration to Salesforce, then server will actually kind of makes, okay, it's a list of records that you need, so probably it will be fetched by using the SObject standard Salesforce out of the box API, right? But let's say if you want to find out what are the close one opportunities with the related contacts, probably you may have to build your own endpoint, or maybe you have to build a composite API to fetch all the accounts that are having with opportunity and contact, and what all the data that you have to push it back to you, back to this particular tool, and then it will be showing to the user, right? So in this case also the API is being utilized. There is API is still there, but it is very rigid in the format, right? Like you cannot actually dynamically create anything out of the blue. So that is where the MCP comes into the picture. So now with the MCP, this is the best thing that is happening right now. As we know, it's given by the Claude and Anthropy, where we have this particular Anthropy given a protocol called Model Context Protocol. Now what is happening? So now the tool or the server who is at the front end is still remaining the same. What is changing is in the back end, right? So now there will be a server agent, there will be a client agent that will be sitting in between our actual server and the client. So now whenever a agent request receives for what is the weather, right? So now this again it will be going to the LLM with what all the tools that it has, right? So that's why before server actually like kind of makes the request to LLM, it will first check or it will first broadcast the signal that these are the servers or these are the server agents that are connected to me, right? What all capabilities or what all tools that you have, you tell me, right? Instead of as above, everything was actually stored in the client itself, but here it is actually kind of it is kind of broadcasting a message saying that please give me all the capabilities that you people have where I have connected. So now let's say I have connected to Salesforce, which is Headless360 for us, and there is another application which is maybe it is Google, Yahoo, internet, like whatever that it can be, right? So everyone will have their own MCP servers which will contain the tool. So now the server which is connected, it has two MCP servers connected to it. One is with the MCP and the other one with this particular agent, right? So when a request comes in, or maybe in the prior only, it will kind of broadcast what all the tools that you have once the connection is established. So as soon as the connection is established to Salesforce will give back the details that these are the tools that I have, these are the capabilities that I have. So let's say at the client end, if I'm talking about weather forecast will already give you the tool as soon as you connect to that particular MCP server, that I can check for weather, I can suggest the clothing. Both of them are readily available for this particular server to ask for. Now when this particular question comes to the user, I'm Vinayaka, like I go to this particular Claude and I asked for what does the weather looks like in Karnataka. Now in this particular server will hands to this particular LLM along with the tool that this server MCP server is already given to me, right? So now LLM understands, okay, it has both the things, right? It has weather and it also has what is the weather, like sorry, what is the cloth that it can actually take care of, right? It can suggest for that also. So now LLM will ask for agent, you take two requests, you get the two responses back to me, right? One is what is the weather and the other one is what is the clothing that it can actually prescribe for. Now this particular request will actually go and it will talk to, let's say, Google, and Google will actually give that weather forecast what is available in the server. It will also give, let's say, today is summer, like sunny, so you may have to wear like a cotton cloth that is best suited for this particular weather, right? So that response will come back and then it will actually move to this particular LLM where it will kind of reformats in the user context and then it will send back, right? Now in this whole process our API is still in picture, right? So when the server going to the client, the API callout is itself is happening, but it is happening based on the model tools that we have, right? So the tooling capability that is coming, based on that only, the end request that will be made is with API only. That means it is not MCP versus API, it's MCP with API. That is what we are trying to understand and achieve, right? So now whenever this particular server and client interaction is happening, it is via API only. But what is that additional MCP is helping? MCP is helping with the context, that it already gives the context to this client server that I can do both of the things. I can answer you for weather, I can answer you for the prescribed clothing also. So both of them will actually go together instead of one by one, or where I have to tag it how I was talking about here. It will be a very rigid way to handle it. So now if I have to handle one more scenario, let's say maybe I have to even suggest for footing, right? Then I just have to create one more tool to this MCP server. I don't have to do anything to this server, right? So automatically whenever I actually attach that particular tool or attach that particular feature to this MCP server as a Google, now Google has three capabilities: weather, clothing prescription, and the footwear prescription. So automatically all these three will be considered in the context for this MCP. Same thing will be broadcasted to the server. Now server knows that this particular weather forecast app can give me three kind of responses or three prescriptions, right? One is on the weather and one is on the clothing, and the other one is on the footwear. So LLM will understand, okay, it can give three of them now instead of two, right? And then all the requests that will be returned back to this particular server will have all the three details. LLM will actually kind of modularize it and structure it in a user readable format and send it across. So now in case of Salesforce, if we talk from the Salesforce angle, let's say that you have your S object that is open, right? Now you want to actually add one more capability, that when the account detail is sent to this particular server back, maybe you need to make it closed one, right? Or like opportunity, if I talk about it, has to make the closed one. So now if I make that particular rigid endpoint, how I would have made in this particular call, probably for closed one, I may have to expose another endpoint where I will consume that particular opportunity ID and mark it as closed one based on the request param. But in this particular case, I can simply enable that particular MCP server from my end, right? And that particular server will actually let the server agent know, that the client agent know, that this particular MCP server can give me results of all the opportunity, but it can also make an update to the opportunity as well. So it can do two activities. Now, when the list of opportunity is being written to this particular client, now LLM structures in a given format and then let's say responds back to this user. Now I'm able to see all the list of opportunities that are with me, right? Now I will tell in a natural language, can you close this particular opportunity of Vinayaka to 1, because I've already spoken with him. Please add a note also so that I can refer it back later. Now, since the tooling is already having the capability of making a DML, so it will kind of mark the status to closed one. Like the server, the client agent can make another API call out in the backend based on the request that is given by the user, that opportunity has to be marked as closed one, plus it has to make a note saying that they already, like Vinaka already spoke with this particular client for marking the opportunity as closed one. So all the details will go and sit in the Salesforce. And using this, like you did not had to do everything from the scratch. Like you did not had to expose the open API. I mean, you did not had to expose your API where you had to specifically write for closed one. Tomorrow, let's say you want to actually create a new opportunity or a follow-up opportunity or maybe a renewal opportunity. If you want to do it, then probably if you just enable that particular tool, because you have already given access to creation of the opportunity. Now creation of opportunity can, if a particular client server already has it, then it can create an opportunity, whether it can be a renewal or whether it can be a new opportunity or whether it can be a follow-up. So everything can be handled using that. That means what we are trying to do at the end, we are trying to give the context to the client API, right? Like we are trying to give the context to that so that LLM can decide what is the right way or right action to be taken. In this whole structure, LLM is not the one who will be acting on, if you have observed my explanation, right? LLM is like a brain, or like kind of a helping the agent to know what exactly it has to do. It's like a brain, right? Like where it will decide you have to make an API call out using this particular tool. But who's the action, who's taking action is taken by agent itself, right? So where it will use that particular tool which LLM told to, and based on that particular tool, whatever the request response that it has expecting, the client is expecting, it will be sending in that format and requesting that in the same format. So that is what is all about. So that's what I wanted to cover in this particular video, where I wanted to understand or make you understand that it is really MCP with API, not MCP versus API. So in the next session, we are going to include our, I mean, we are going to connect our Claude with Salesforce. For that, like I highly recommend you to create a new developer edition. I have already created this developer edition, like I have already signed up. So I just wanted to quickly show you how we can actually enable MCP server. So I am in the developer org right now, and then if I go to the setup, so it's just a point and click that we have to do. You can just search for MCP, and then you can see everything is actually disabled right now, right? So you just have to go and activate it. So we will do that in the next session, and we will also try to connect that this particular MCPs that we have enabled. Probably we will try to enable one or two, and then we will actually connect that with the Claude and see how the request response is coming. We will also see definitely how we can connect this particular MCP servers to our Claude. Thank you so much for your patience and the time. Happy learning.